In today's episode, who needs an attendance policy anyways? Impatient lady tells me how to do my job, waits longer BC she has no idea how my job works. You don't want me to organize our documents? Cool, I won't do it then. So let's get started. Who needs an attendance policy anyways? This is my first time posting here, so I'm hoping this is a good fit. Please forgive me if I go into too much detail, I tend to yammer sometimes. For 7 years I worked for a major internet provider in the United States. Most existing technicians were part of a union and had been for quite some time. They had an impressive array of benefits, and an impressive hourly pay as well. To get around this, whenever this ISP rolled out the newer, fiber-based internet/TV/phone, they would create a new technician position for completing the installs and repairs. Since this new position wasn't covered by the union contract yet, it has to be voted on and whatnot, the ISP would get a year or two of running these guys ragged for minimal pay and benefits. I was one of those guys, hired on for less than I was making as a department manager working retail in order to work 50 to 60-hour weeks. Once we joined the union, it came with better benefits and pay, but some things got weird. We were an addendum in the contract that covered the old-timers, and as such a lot of our rules weren't really specified. Honestly, it felt at times our position's benefits was used as a bargaining chip by the old guard to get what they wanted, but I guess that isn't really what is important to the story. What is important to the story is, we didn't have an official attendance policy at all. Whenever you would look up the attendance policy in the handbook, it'd tell you to see your manager for details. I finally managed to get a copy of what the manager's handbook said, and it wasn't good. Basically, it recommended using common sense when deciding attendance discipline. Our local managers interpreted this to mean advance to the next step of discipline, unless it was literally illegal to do so. This led to some weird situations. One time, after a particularly long install in the southern summer running lines through an attic, I wasn't feeling too well. Definitely signs of dehydration, a headache, dizziness, wasn't thinking clearly. I called up my boss and said I need to pack it in for the day. He hummed and hawed over it, didn't sound happy, but after reminding him that we're constantly told safety is our responsibility, aka, if something goes wrong it must have been our fault, he allowed me to return to the garage. Once I was at the garage, however, he told me that in order to not count as a complete absence, I'd need to go to the doctor and file for FMLA. Family Medical Leave Act. This was one of my first malicious compliances, because in order to qualify for FMLA you have to miss at least 3 days. So, because they wanted to put up a stink about it, went to the doctor, gave him the paperwork, and took the next 3 days off. Turns out I was, to absolutely no shock to me, denied FMLA. Fortunately, when they tried to write me up for attendance, I pointed out that not only did I have permission to stop working that day before returning to the garage, but I was following their instructions by filing for FMLA. They tried to say in that case, we'll only keep the write-up on file for 90 days, and then remove it if you don't have any other absences. The union rep didn't buy that one either, the write-up got torn up before we left the office. But the whole experience taught me a weird lesson about how they handled sick days and occurrences. See, we got 5 paid sick days, but they weren't excused sick days. Which meant you could be fired before even using them all, since management decided each absence was an instant step of discipline regardless of reason, despite their guidelines saying to use common sense. But there was a catch, concurrent absences only counted as one occurrence. Missed 1 day? That was one occurrence. Missed 5 days in a row? Still only one occurrence, even if it was separated by a scheduled day off. It was the one rule that was specified in the manager guidelines. You can bet I sure as hell shared that information with all the other technicians. If you were out a single day due to illness, you might as well take an entire week off with pay, because you'll never get to use that time otherwise. The managers hated me for it, but I was a bit bitter over the whole FMLA thing, and would share that info every single time it came up. They'd threaten to write me up for insubordination, but I just tell them we could discuss it in the presence of my union. After all I was doing was sharing information on the attendance policy. The same policy that they used to screw us every chance they go. Impatient lady tells me how to do my job, waits longer BC she has no idea how my job works. Obligatory apology for mobile formatting. This happened several years ago. I'm a medical lab technician at an urgent care clinic. You know when you go to the doctor and they want you to pee in a cup and put it in a little door in the wall? Well, I'm the guy on the other side of the door. My job consists mainly of testing samples, but also occasionally collecting, drawing blood. At a certain point in the evening I'm alone, and doing all of the above with no extra help. This is usually fine, as patients tend to understand that I am one person, and will help them as soon as possible. Enter the lady. She had checked in for vaginal/STI concerns, happens multiple times a shift, NBD. She was also one of the last patients of the night, so I was alone. Typically what happens with these patients is the doctor will collect samples in the room, one of which is to check for routine non-STI stuff, yeast BV. Then they bring it to me to test, then send the patient over for a blood draw for the more serious stuff that we send out to a different lab for testing, syphilis, HIV, etc. They'll see the patient again after that, once I've put the result in for the routine test and drawn their blood. This is exactly what happened that night. I greet her and tell her it'll be a few minutes. I then go back to finish the routine test, so the time it takes me to draw her blood can also be used for the doctor to go over the routine results, get their plan together for her, and send her on her way. This speeds things up for her, not for me, as I have to wait for the blood to clot and spin in a centrifuge after I draw it, an extra 20 to 30 minutes or so before I can leave for the night. Well, it's been 3 minutes, and she sees me through the glass still looking into the microscope working on her test. She waves her hands to get my attention, looking very annoyed. I go out there to attempt to explain what I'm doing, but before I can get a word out she rudely exclaims that she wants her blood drawn now. I maliciously comply, leaving the result to dangle an extra 5 to 10 minutes in limbo, which can easily compound into much longer of a wait if the doctor is busy with something else. As I'm finishing the blood draw she asks how long before the test they collected in the room comes back? Here's my favorite part. I flatly tell her I was just about done with it. That look of realization, that she had interrupted my helping her to demand that I help her, was priceless. She just said oh, and then very quietly went back to the lobby to wait. It was one very rare night that I got to leave before the last patient. You don't want me to organize our documents? Cool, I won't do it then. This is something I remembered about my previous job, and I want to share it. I used to work as a legal assistant in a big electric energy company. They're owners of a lot of wind energy plants here in my country, and to say that they're a strong competitor in this market is an understatement at best. We initially used Microsoft SharePoint as a server for all of our functional systems and to save all of our documents, but the CEO decided to change it to the Box system. The difference between them was so huge that it was shocking. I was usually in charge of saving all of our documents and data in the system, so when the change was announced, I expected orders coming from the legal counselor, the final boss of my department, obviously, to give me that direct order. During a team call via Teams, she started to talk about Box, and how we must organize our stuff. Since a big part of them were the company's contracts, we needed everything in check. As ridiculous as this sounds, the legal department wasn't liked by at least 5 other departments. And truth be told, our document server was a mess. Each person had their own way to save stuff and nothing made sense. Even the legal counselor said it herself. Our server looked like some kid's room when they have a lot of fun and don't tidy up on the next second. Of course, this was extremely bad. As she mentioned the organization of the system, I immediately proposed to be the one to create a routine for us to save stuff, such as the archive naming, folder distribution, etc. The paralegal, she was great, also offered to help me, since the workload was immense. We practically would start from scratch and do our best without a basis. My direct boss, one of the legal analysts, immediately interrupted us and said she was going to do it. I told her she wouldn't have enough time, since she's mostly busy analyzing contracts and other incidents. She said for me not to worry, because I also had a truckload of things to do, and that I wouldn't do a great job anyway. Really? Fine, I won't do it then. Fast forward to a month, we were entering the archive transferring phase of the project. Every single department in the company must have their server organized, because they would do a direct transfer without any sort of checking. Guess what? Our server was still a freaking mess. And to top it all off, the VP came towards the legal counselor and ordered her to have everything organized in 48H. Yes, 48H to organize a completely complicated and messy server. In an emergency team call, she questioned my boss why nothing has been done regarding the server. My boss, trying to keep her own slate clean, threw me under the bus, saying that she shifted the responsibility to me. Luckily, the paralegal backed me up and saved me. She reminded us of the call where my boss strictly told me to not do anything, since I wouldn't do a good job. Despite the hassle, the counselor told me to stop everything I was previously doing and just organize our system. And so I did. I cleaned up the server in the allotted time, had to reorganize everything on my own, didn't eat, sleep. Just to make sure everything was in check. When the day came, the VP checked on us again and saw what I did. She said for the counselor to not let things go out this way again, and that I had done a miracle and a half for my department. Boy, what a day! If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.